Using Web API analyzers. In each section, we have been seeing the different types of technologies or the steps available that enhances the OpenAPI document that you are generating for your OpenAPI document. As part of those steps, in this section, we will see how you can use one such concept called API analyzers. As the name tells, these are going to analyze your web APIs through the controllers and the action methods and going to suggest some warnings or options for you. These are going to immensely help you in generating the proper OpenAPI documentations. Let's see the different steps involved in using these Web API analyzers in this section. Before we move further, let's see the list of topics that we are going to cover in this section. First, we'll look at what are these Web API analyzers. It's going to be a simple concept that you can add to your Web API. Let's cover that in this first lesson. Next, as step 8, we will go ahead and enable Web API analyzers for your Web API project. Similar to the other settings, it's going to be extremely simpler by enabling one or two settings in one specific file. Let's cover that in step 8. Once done, in step 9, we will add annotations as per the warnings provided by these API analyzers. So you'll be going through each of the warnings and then try to mitigate them by complying to those warnings. Once done, then it's going to enhance your OpenAPI document. Let's cover that in step 9. Once this is done, by the end of this section, you will be able to document your Web API a lot better using these Web API analyzers. Let's get started with the first lesson, namely what are Web API analyzers. What are Web API analyzers? Let's look at the official definition. A mechanism provided by ASP.NET to validate the action response types to work with API documentation. The keywords that you need to concentrate is in the bold face. Validate the action response types. So as the definition tells, as well as from the name, these API analyzers is going to analyze your controllers and specifically the action methods implemented within those controllers and check their response types. It will check whether those response types has been documented properly in your OpenAPI document or not. For instance, let's take the get courses. This is one of the action method exposed in the courses resource. This API analyzers, once enabled, is going to check whether the get courses action method has been documented properly with what are the list of responses written by it. The get courses, being the get action method, can return response code 200 or say internal server error with status code 500. In such case, this API analyzer will look for those 200 and 500 status codes to be documented properly. If it is not documented, then it's going to show us a warning, thereby providing you with an option to include those specific response types as part of the documentation. Next, let us look at a bit more about these Web API analyzers. The first point to note is that these are applicable only for Web API projects. So if you are going to work with other .NET projects, then this may not be applicable. So if you are going to use Web API projects, then it's strongly recommended to enable this Web API so that you can enhance your documents. The second point is that, as mentioned before, it is going to check all the controller classes that has been included in your assembly. Whichever has been derived from controller base and having the tag or the attribute API controllers is going to check all those classes. Finally, it's going to validate all the action methods that has been defined in those controllers. Like I mentioned before with an example of get courses, it's going to check all such action methods that has been introduced in those controllers and look for their responses. So whichever the response codes has not been documented, then it's going to show the warnings. These Web API analyzers are very helpful to make sure your controller follows API guidelines provided by Microsoft. I strongly recommend you to enable this setting so that you know that certain responses are not been documented and hence you can go and include them so that you can improve the OpenAPI documentation. That is the whole purpose of watching this course, right? Because you want to learn the different tips, different technologies available so that you can enhance your OpenAPI documentation. Web API analyzers is one such toolset that you need to add to your Web API project. In the next lesson, let's see how you can enable these web analyzers to your current cms.webapi project. Let's see in this step how to enable these OpenAPI analyzers to our Web API project. To include this OpenAPI analyzer settings to your project, you go to the cms.webapi.cs proj file and then include one of the settings called include OpenAPI analyzers. You just need to set this property to true. Once you have done this and then save and then build the project, then you can see various warnings that is going to get displayed for your Web API project. Let's go on and build it. .NET build. So once you do this, then this OpenAPI analyzer is going to check all the controllers present in your project. Currently, you have just one controller called courses controller. Within that, you have multiple API endpoints like get courses, add course, delete, and so on. So this is going to check all these methods and look at whether it's going to return all the response codes and it has been documented or not. Now we can see that we have got 13 warnings. Let's look at what are those warnings. Let's pick one example. Okay, here we have delete course and the error message says that action method returns undeclared status code 404. So which means that if you can see here in the delete course method, we have various responses returned. We have not found, bad request, and we also have status code for 500. So all these are different HTTP status codes being returned from this specific action method. But you can see that we have not documented them at the top. If you don't do this, then these details are not going to get captured in your OpenAPI document. Let's see in the next step how you can address these warnings. So we are going to add the respective attributes using the various commands available in ASP.NET Core. Once done, then we can overcome these warnings and extend the documentation. Let's cover that in the next step. Step 9. Add annotations as per warnings. So in this step, we will see how we can mitigate the warnings that has been thrown to us when you have enabled these OpenAPI analyzers. These warnings are good because it shows us that we have missed certain documentation parts. So in this step, we will go ahead and address these warnings so that we can include additional attributes that provides extra documentation. Let's pick the get courses method, and we have not documented anything over here. So you can see that it returns not found, successful is going to be HTTP status code 200, as well as we have the 500. Let's see how we can document this using one of the attribute called produces response type. You can use this produces response type attribute to document the responses that is being returned by this specific action method. Of course, if your action method is going to have more than one responses, then you can include all of those responses using these attributes one after the other. Let's first do it for the status code 200. So produces response type 200, and similarly you can do it for 500. And you can notice that we are also returning not found. In such case, you need to return 404. So once you do this, then those warnings are going to get subsidized. Let's see what happens now. If we go over to the build and then build it again, so we have included and we have addressed to these three different response types. So ideally, the warning should not be visible for those get courses method. Now we can see that the list of warnings has been reduced to 11 compared to the previous number. So if you now generate the documentation and check the output, then for the get courses, it should have these three as being response types. Let's check it out. So once the application has been built, if I go to the Swagger UI, we have added the attributes for the individual course ID. So get course ID. Once we expand this and come to the responses section, you can see that now it has documented status code 200, 404, that is not found, and finally we have 500. So this is one additional step, right? Means you have now included additional details such as documenting those response types. The same was not available for other action methods before. For example, let us look at in the case of put method. Here we have only the status code 200. It doesn't have the other types defined. Similarly, if you look at the delete, Under the responses, again we have only the default 200 being documented. So in a similar fashion, how we have done for the get courses, you can go ahead for each of these action methods and add this produces response type attribute to them. This way you can include the response type for all the action results endpoints that is present in your controllers. In fact, there is another setting that you can make use of that is going to improve your life a lot easier. Coming back to the source code, suppose what we want to do if we need to include this produces response type for all the action methods. For instance, if you look at this catch exception block, we have logged status code 500 for all the action methods. We have for the get course, for the update course, for the delete course. So in fact, for all the action methods, I have included the try catch block. Inside the catch block, I have returned status code 500. Of course, one way is to go ahead and add the produces response type attribute for each of these action methods. But since it is common, would it be better if we can do it at one place so that it is applicable for all action methods? Of course, we have one such method that we can handle in the startup.cs. So what we are going to do is we can set one setting mentioning that this specific attribute is going to be applicable for all the action methods for this specific status code. Let's see how we can do it. For this, you go to the startup.cs. Let's close it. And then let me go to the add controllers method. Note that this add controllers command is going to include many details for your web API project. So if you look at its documentation, it has internally added add MVC core along with add API explorer, add authorization, then add data annotations and so on. So this single method add controllers is going to provide you lots of features for your web API project. Among these, one such settings is to enable this status code produces response type globally. For this, you can use c.filters. So filters is the one which you need to use if you want to apply a specific attribute to all the controllers and the action methods. Within the c.filters, you use one of the method called add. And within this, you need to provide new produces response type attribute, because this is what you want to add it for all the controllers and the action methods inside that. So within this, we want to mention which status code. For our case, we want to include 500. So once you do this, then it's going to add the attribute produces response type for status code 500 for all the action methods. Let us summarize some of the key concepts you have learned in this section using Web API analyzers. In the first lesson, you had learned what are these Web API analyzers. These are basically included so that it can monitor all the API controllers and specifically the action methods and document the list of response codes that has not been added to the documentation. So this is going to be extremely helpful for you to enhance your documentation. In step 8, you went ahead and enabled the Web API analyzers to your cms.webapi project using one of the setting called include OpenAPI analyzers. Once you enable this setting in the CS proj, then the .NET is going to check for all the controllers present in your Web API project and look for all the action methods and then would provide you with a set of warnings. Once you have these warnings, in step 9, you went ahead and added annotations as per this list of warnings provided by it. You included the attribute, namely produces response type for each of the action methods that documents the specific HTTP status codes for those action methods. Once you have added this produces response type for all your action methods, then it has immensely enhanced your OpenAPI document. This concludes using the OpenAPI analyzers for your cms.webapi project. In the next section, we will look at one similar concept called API conventions that is going to provide you with ready-made solutions that you can make use of to enhance your documentation. Let's look about API extensions in the next section.